This is going to be a short video on the academic side of high school versus college. I've been going to college for the past 3 years, 3.5, so I know what I'm talking about. In high school you had classes from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 8 to 1 or 8 to 2 or 7 to 1 with 6 to 8 classes Monday through Friday. Well, in college, you pick the time and the day. In high school, you get predetermined teachers and students who have no control over this. And in college, while you don't have control, obviously, over the amount of students or who you end up with, you get control over the teachers. You get to choose who teaches what class. And a good website to go to for this is www.ratemyprofessors, all one word, .com, to check on your professors in your area's college or university for the classes that you will be taking. In high school, homework was almost non-existent. It depended on the school. It really depended on the school and the teachers and the principals. But you had some, but not much. Again, like I said, depends on the teacher. You had a lot of hands-on projects. But in college, there is no day off. Depending on what the class is, you might even have homework on Saturday. You always have homework. And even if it's not any written work, you have to do some reading. You have to do actually quite a bit of reading. In the beginning, you're going to think is really difficult. My high school was college preparatory, so it wasn't too difficult for me. But for the average individual, it is tough. This is like I said, this is the readings in addition to anything else the professor wants, written work. In terms of general credits, there are no hands-on projects with the exception of science classes. And what I mean is, once you get into your major, you're going to get into more hands-on stuff. But for general ed, like I said, with the exception of lectures, with the exception of your science lab, it's lecture format, and I'll get to that in just a moment. In high school, students get to participate in in-class projects and readings, and the teacher uses a variety of instructional methods to teach content. In college, again, this is for general credits with the exception of science labs. Once you get into the major, it's going to become more hands-on. The professor will stand in front of the class and lecture for the entire class period. And incidentally, you're not expected to sit there and stare off into space, even though I know some people do. You are expected to take notes on the lecture. A lot of times the exams are often based on lectures, text readings, or both. And incidentally, your exams end up becoming quite a substantial part of your grade. Depends on the professor, depends on the projects, depends on what goes on. But for the most part, your professor ends up assigning the quiz as the bulk of your grade. So pay attention and take notes. You'll need to. In high school, your parents got access to your records, if needed. Now in college, you, as a legal adult, must provide written consent, even for your own parents, to obtain any information regarding what happens on campus. The sole exception of this is if law enforcement needs to be involved. Now, for anybody who's watching this, and I know there are several of my subscribers who have a vision disability, such as I do, in high school, you guys had an IEP to depend on, right? And your accommodations were given to you via the IEP. In college, you are protected under the ADA, but you are expected to make those accommodations. There is a, in my area they call it a disability resource center. So your area may be different, but it's pretty much the same thing. What it is, it's a group of counselors that have been assigned to be responsible for your needs as a student with disabilities. Now, their job is to provide you with with accommodations. Now, what could your accommodations be? Well, nobody knows them better than you do. And what type of records do you give the colleges? Well, it depends on the college. My community college was fine with having an IEP, but in a couple of years they will need updated information, so as such, be prepared to hand over a copy of your medical records. When I had to prepare for the praxis, they wouldn't even take an IEP. They needed to have my medical records from my eye examiners, both of them actually. Was it both or just one? I think it was just my retinal specialist. But you do have to have that type of documentation, because if that documentation is not provided, you can't get services, period. The services they provide are things from test taking to note-taking services to providing books in DAISY format on disc. One thing to be aware of if you need DAISY books on disc, get them in as soon as possible. So for those of you who are general credits and need your books in, what you want to do is this. You want to sign up for your classes, get the books from your professors. Just contact them and say, hey, I'm going to be in your class. What books are we going to use? Get that information as soon as possible and then get it submitted to your Disability Resource Center. I don't know about the rest of the nation, but my local college has a membership with the RFB&D. And RFB&D, when it comes to college books, especially if they don't have them, is as slow as heck. I'm serious. I was halfway through my first semester. Thankfully, I was able to get along fine with my regular textbook and a magnifier, because the book that I was getting for my art class was going to be on tape. It was about, 10 cassettes, and it was about half a semester late. You heard me correctly. Half a semester late. So those accommodations are there, but you have to be the one to say, hey, I need this. I really think this could help me. And if the counselors feel otherwise, you just sit down with them. I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you. But again, they would provide books, test-taking, note-taking services, and if you need a science lab, they even provide lab partners. That depends, again, on the institution and what their rules are. Speaking of semesters, I forgot one more thing. You remember in high school how you would have half of your class, you go on winter break, and you come back? That's not going to happen in college. In college, you have a full class from the period of, let's say, August through December, and then again and then another full class from January through May. So it does move a lot faster than you're used to if you're just coming from high school. But believe me, it takes determination. It takes perseverance. You have to be determined to succeed, and you will. One thing I should note, I said that there's a lot of reading, and I'm not kidding. Say for, I guess maybe in high school you probably got through a chapter in about a week or 2 or 3. With a college professor, it depends. I had a college professor for my astronomy lecture class, Astronomy 103, where we would go through 2 chapters a week, and each chapter was about 30 pages. So it was about 60 pages of reading a week for that one class. And then you had 3 other classes to worry about, where you'd have reading to do for them. So it is a lot of reading and a lot of work. You have to basically, depending on who you are, you might have to put your social life on hold. Because in addition to all this homework, the average college student would have to work for their tuition if their parents are not willing to provide, and if they can't make it on scholarships, they have no choice but to work. So you're going to have to put your social life on hold, because working with your college classes and working with your employment, that is a challenge. It's hard to juggle, but believe me, it can be done. And again, for those of you with a documented disability, contact your Disability Resource Center, sit down with your disability counselors, and they will be happy to help you. As far as planning classes, you also want to sit down with an academic counselor the very first time. This is absolutely mandatory because they want to know what your major is going to be. Even if you don't have one yet, you still need to go through general credits, so sit down with them, talk to them, and they'll help you. Comments and questions are welcome. Thank you for watching, and have a nice evening.